Today I'm excited to be part of Michelle Lupton's annual Case Me a Christmas Card event. This year there's a lot of big changes, including I think 10 hops over the next few weeks, and some very generous sponsors and prizes you can be eligible to win if you play along. I'll put a link to all the information below so you can get the details. For today's video hop, each one of us is choosing inspiration from the person after us. So lucky me, I got my friend Carly. Carly has a very distinctive, clean card making style and a few favorite techniques that she turns to quite often. So we'll talk a bit about that as we go through. I chose this simple Carly card as my inspiration for today. And as usual, I'm going to use my little LIMES checklist to show you just 3 examples of the many ways to interpret an inspiration and make a card that's your own. Remember, LIMES stands for List, Include, Modify, Exclude, and Spin. Let's jump right in and list the attributes of Carly's card. First, colors. Carly's got some green, pink, black, and lots of white. Her techniques include stenciling, stamping, die cutting, and what I'm going to call controlled splatter. I know Carly likes to use a black marker to make her little black dots. For elements, there's a grid of big green dots that does not extend to the bottom of the card. There are 5 die-cut pink flowers with black centers placed kind of randomly on the grid. She's got a small sentiment on the right side of the open area at the bottom of the card, and as I said before, some black dots. For my first card, I'm going back to a stencil technique I did last week with the Bauhaus Circle stencil from our Colorful Life Designs. I sprayed some pixie spray on the back of it so I won't have any lifting while I'm blending my 3 frosty colors, Fiesta Blue, Serenade, and Cummerbund. I actually have the stencil that Carly used for her card, but I chose this stencil because while it is a grid of dots like Carly's, it's also a little different. And my first LIMES tip is exactly that. Even simple details don't have to be exactly the same. In fact, I think it's easier to make a card your own if you make sure nothing about the card is exactly the same. My colors are cool and blended, so definitely not the solid green that Carly used, and that's another way to easily differentiate your card from your inspiration. Change the colors or even the number of colors. When I finish the blending, I trim the panel down, so it'll cover the top kind of 2/3 of my card. So right now my layout plan is pretty much the same as Carly's. Those white dots are the perfect size to add my version of Carly's die-cut flowers. But since I'm making a Christmas card, I chose a small kind of star or snowflake from an old Catherine Pooler stamp set. I stamped 1 in each of the dots, and I started with the Cummerbund up where the kind of purpley Serenade blending is sitting. And then I switched to Fiesta Blue, and then finally the Serenade, just to kind of try and balance the colors on the panel a little bit. You could stamp with a Misty if you prefer, but for repeat stamping like this, I find an acrylic block faster. You really just want to be sure that your ink pads are well filled so you get a good impression the first time. Next, I went back in with some black ink and a small dot stamp to mimic the black flower centers on Carly's card. You could do this with just a black marker actually, or even a stencil if you have one with a small enough dot, but stamping's pretty quick. For my sentiment, I'm definitely using my Misty. I lined up my card base in it and then I placed the blue panel where it'll go so I can get the position just right. I chose All Is Calm, All Is Bright from Holiday Typewriter from Simon Says Stamp. It's a little bigger than Carly's sentiment, but changing the scale of elements is another way to put your own spin on an inspiration. So the next thing was Carly's signature precision splatter. I tend to use gold or silver watercolor splatter myself rather than black, and I could have done that to add my own twist, but I wanted that kind of minimal splatter look that she gets. And I didn't want to get it wrong either. So instead of using a marker, I grabbed the smallest splatter stamp from the Long Line Leaves stamp set from Concord and Ninth, and I stamped it in black near my sentiment. Oh boy, even that looks like it might be too much. But I think I need to balance it around the sentiment, so I used another Carly trick to position my inky stamp on the other side by using a piece of acetate. This protects the surface of your panel, and it allows you to position a clean or dirty stamp and test it out before stamping directly onto your card. I think the little splatter dots tie in pretty nicely with the dots and the stars. And just before I finished this card, I spritzed the blue panel with some iridescent shimmer spray. I know Carly's card doesn't have that, but it's Christmas, and I think the frosty colors and the shimmer help with that feeling. Okay, let's take a look. There are clear differences here, but I think it's easy to see how Carly's card influenced mine. Even though the colors are different and the dots are very different, and even the card size is different, the layout is the same, and that's a very strong connection. And just quickly, here's what happened when I changed the layout a little bit. I still had quite a bit of that 6x6 panel left, so I made a second card, but I put the grid of circles on the side instead of the top. I filled in the white dots with black stamped snowflakes this time, and I put my sentiment to the right. Since my grid covers less of the card, I actually increased the size of my sentiment to create better balance on the two halves. So side by side, this looks quite a bit more different, even though I used very similar elements. For my second card, I started with this die-cut grid of circles. This is a cover plate die from Pinkfresh Studios, and so right away I changed techniques from stenciling to die cutting. I did a deep dive with this die a little while ago, and one of the magic things about it is that you can use the die itself to cut the die down to a smaller grid to fit on your card however you want it. You just take the die cut and kind of click it into place where you want to cut it off, and then you run it through your die cutting machine again. Pretty cool, right? When it came to the flowers, I guess a poinsettia is the obvious choice at Christmas, right? But I don't really have a small enough poinsettia for this circle grid, so I decided to do holly instead. I have this tiny little holly die from a Jillian Vance design, and I love it because it's so easy to work with. It cuts one piece that is really two joined holly leaves with a spot for a berry to go. I cut 9 of them and I laid them on my grip mat so that I could color them with ink. I started with the leaves in my Lime Ricky ink, and I used a small blending brush to get the ink down on all of those. Then I moved on to the berries, and I used Samba for these. Because they're so small, I want really bright pops of red, and this is a really bright orangey red. To add some dimension to the leaves, I grabbed a dark green Copic marker, and I colored kind of in a V on each die cut. If the leaves were larger, I probably would have used darker green ink and some masking, but these are so small, I find that a marker is just easier. You can see that as the inks are drying, everything is toning down, and there's slightly less contrast, so don't be afraid to go for a marker that seems to be quite dark. For dimension on the berries, I added a small dot with a white paint pen to each one, and then let me show you how easy it is to put these together. I just put a small dot of liquid glue on the base of the holly leaves and add a berry. So cute, and much easier than trying to line it all up if everything was separate. Now, just before moving on, let's see if I can get the Copic marker off the grip mat. I know some of you will be wondering. I tried just with water, and that didn't clean it off. So then I went back in with stamp cleaner, and that got a little bit of it off. I don't really want to try rubbing alcohol. I'm pretty sure that's not going to be good for the photopolymer. I'm okay with these stains on my grip mat, but if it bothers you, just do that coloring on a piece of paper instead. I placed all the holly on my circle grid, and I kind of wish I had been a little less random and had them all at least facing in the same direction, but that's something I can do differently next time. And then I moved on to adding tiny foam dots to the back of each of the circles. One of the things I love about this die cut is that you can pop it up and create so much visual interest with the shadows. Because the holly is green and red, I left the circles white. I thought about having a green background to be another change from Carly's card, but I feel like one of the things about Carly's cards is that they almost always feel very light and airy, with lots of white space, and if nothing else, that's the thing that's going to give my card a Carly feel. I stamped a Merry Christmas from Simon Says stamp directly onto my card base with black ink. This one's bigger than Carly's, but I think it balances the holly leaves quite well. My last finishing touch was to add some crystal glaze to the berries. Carly likes to do this quite a bit. In fact, she does some amazing things with her glossy accents, including masking or adding glitter, but I just wanted the shine and dimension of it here. Again, these cards are looking quite different, aren't they? But that grid partially covering the card really ties them together. My colors are red and green, so they're a little more similar to Carly's this time, but they're in completely different proportions. I probably could have left one more row in my grid and maybe done fewer hollies to get a look more like the inspiration, but I think this is fresh with a classic festive feel. Okay, now for my last one, I'm going way off book. First, I'm using a gel plate, which is something I don't think I've ever seen Carly do. I'm using it with my Catherine Pooler inks to create some red and green cardstock. I've got Limoncello, Samba, and Flirty Fuchsia here, because I love to make red cardstock that has some brighter oranger areas and some darker, more purpley areas. I put down just a few kind of patches of the yellow ink, and I pulled it off the gel plate with my cardstock. Then I added some of the purple ink, trying to get it in different areas than the yellow. I'm using a brayer to spread the ink a little bit, and I'm cleaning the brayer off on a piece of cardstock just to the left of me here. Now that I've got my base, I went back and put Samba ink all over the gel plate, and this time I didn't brayer it off. I want all that ink to be pulled off onto the cardstock. You may think this looks like a mess, but I love it, and I know it's going to be amazing with a few more layers. I added a little bit more yellow to that one bright area to try and keep it as a highlight. I felt like it wasn't getting red enough fast enough, so I grabbed my Rocky Red ink and I put a layer of that down. I brayered it out so I wouldn't get so many hard edges from the ink pads, and now we're talking. That's looking so good. I put another layer of Rocky Red onto the gel plate, and this time before I put down the cardstock, I pressed some bubble wrap into it. Look at this! I love this so much. Now it's all going to dry back a bit, so it's important that you use lots of layers and go quite dark if you want vibrant colors on your finished card. I grabbed these old waffle flower poinsettia dies. I think these are my all-time favorite poinsettias, and I cut them from different areas of the panel. See how much interest the different colors add to this flower? Yes, only one flower. Although creating panels like this would definitely allow you to make multiples. Let's move on to the green, and then you'll see my strategy for this card. I grabbed With an Olive, which is really almost yellow, and I put down my highlight areas. Oh, there's still quite a bit of red on that gel plate, isn't there? And then I moved on to Eucalyptus, which is my darkest, and I did that kind of patchy thing again, spreading it a little bit with the brayer. Well, that is not as dark as I thought it would be, so I added another layer to get some more depth with that color. Then I moved to more of an all-over layer with the green tea ink, and I decided to leave it like that. There's still quite a bit of texture there, but I know as it dries back, it'll be less dramatic. I cut a circle. Yes, I'm doing one single dot with one single flower for this card, and I tried to get some lighter and darker areas in my circle. So this is a rather radical way of being inspired. I took one green dot with one flower from Carly's card, and I made that into the focal panel of my card. I added a little Mama Elephant Merry Christmas sentiment in the bottom right corner, so that's pretty true to Carly's layout, but of course the grid has been replaced with just one flower. To add some sparkle, I put Stickles on the edges of my white panel, and instead of worrying about getting perfect placement, I usually just put a line down the edge and then I smear it a little bit with my finger. It kind of flattens out and just looks a little bit more natural. I also added Stickles to the little yellow dots in the flower of the poinsettia. So when we compare, this is probably the hardest one to see the connection, but it is still there. My colors are a little more on the warm side, of course, and the shape and the feel of the flower is more intricate and realistic, a little less playful than Carly's. Focusing on one little area of the inspiration and making it your focal point is a really fun and creative way to use the inspiration, but in a completely different way. There's no rules of how much or how little you have to change an inspiration card when you're casing. Sometimes you just want to make that exact card, and that's okay too. Just remember to give credit to the original designer if you're posting it somewhere. But there are lots of strategies for changing things up to make it your own. Now it's time to head to Carly's video. I've put the link below for you. I hope you enjoyed the hop and you're inspired to participate. I want to thank Michelle for inviting me again this year. I always look forward to being part of this event, and I'm excited to see how it's grown and changed over the years. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.